What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for tonight's single game showdown slate on Monday Night Football. It's Week 12, Baltimore Ravens and the Los Angeles Chargers. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. In this video, we will talk about the injuries that impact tonight's slate. There are a couple defensive injuries to keep an eye on. We will talk about low-risk lineup construction tips and core plays, and then we'll analyze some ideas, strategies, and picks for the largest GPPs and the biggest prizes that DraftKings and FanDuel have to offer. Help you win those prizes like our member Candid did last Monday night, which I can't believe I didn't mention this in the Thursday video, but our member Candid, $15 into $83,000. Was talking about it and was sweating it in our Discord. The Trust the Model play on Cavante Turpin, who I talked about in this video last Monday. Just take a look at this, 83K for Candid. Excellent lineup. Pretty life-changing amount. So shout out to Candid. And if you want to use the model like Candid did, link is in the description below. And we talked about Thursday's game, the weather game, Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And as I said in the video, sometimes these angles work out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes overperforming running backs or underperforming running backs do work out or they don't work out. But when they do work out, we generally win. And that's what happened to me on the Thursday game. This was the 7-7-7, got first place and a relatively sweat-free, won by 6 or 7 points. Nice little 7K win for me when you follow the weather angles. And again, they won't always work, but when they do work, you generally end up at the top of leaderboards. So just keep that in mind as we approach these winter months and these final few weeks of the season. All right, let's talk about tonight's slate. And I guess before we do, though, an interesting schedule this week. Obviously, Thanksgiving is on Thursday. We have the 3-game slate. I will be live. We'll probably do a pre-recorded video with Jack sometime Wednesday, the lineup builder architect, short slate killer. And then we have a random Friday game as well, a single game slate at like 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon. We'll have a video for that. Obviously, the main slate is on Sunday. So to make sure you get notified when those videos drop, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We will have a video for all of those slates. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the video for tonight's slate. Now, injuries, really just defensive injuries. Roquan Smith, middle linebacker for Baltimore, their signal caller, hasn't practiced all week, didn't even participate in the walkthrough on Saturday, and they've already made some contingency plans. They talked about what would happen if Roquan is out. They said Kyle Hamilton will wear the green dot. We'll replace Roquan by committee with a couple of guys. The fact that they're even talking about this lends me to believe that Roquan won't be available. That's a pretty big loss for this defense. So we can bump up some Chargers players in our lineups, and then Chargers are missing their middle linebacker as well, Denzel Perryman. So both these teams missing their star inside guys on defense, and that could lead to more scoring, despite how well the Chargers defense has been playing as of late, up until the second half of that Bengals game last week. So, but no offensive injuries, no major role changes or anything we need to discuss there. So let's get into low-risk lineup construction tips, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. Just have to beat half the field to double your money. You know the strategy by now if you've been watching all season. Try to lock up all the scoring, both quarterbacks and both running backs, and play any obvious values or mispricings. So if we start with this, and let's get both teams in here. Lamar, Derrick Henry, Justin Herbert, the 3 locks for tonight's low-risk lineups. Now, the next would be J.K. Dobbins, but he is priced up at $10,000, which is extremely pricey for a guy who's in a 3-way committee. Yes, he's in a 3-way committee, and he's been vastly overperforming his expected fantasy points throughout the season. A lot of that came earlier in the year, but still he's overperforming. And at 10K, if you tried to fit him in, you technically could do this. 11.5 or $1,150 left over, but then you have to punt 2 spots. There are a couple guys down here, but it's really not the route that you want to go tonight. You could switch up from Lamar captain to Justin Herbert captain, but that only saves you a few $100 as well. So we're probably going to leave out Dobbins in our low-risk core tonight. That leaves you at 4,100. Then you can play any of these mid-range guys. Like if you look at the Baltimore Titans situation, their prices have fluctuated pretty dramatically throughout showdown slates throughout the season. They're both relatively affordably priced. Both will be pretty decently involved, and they're both will be popular. So they're good for low-risk lineups. Then you could play, whether it's Justice Hill, who will also be popular, Gus Edwards. You could drop down and do just one of these guys, and you could play a punt like, who we got down here? The punts aren't that great tonight. Jalen Reagor will be somewhat popular. You can go all the way down and super punt the last position. But I really think it's probably something like this, whether it's Tucker, Andrews likely, Justice Hill, defense, something in this range. It's probably Lamar, Henry, Herbert, and then 3 mid-range players for your low-risk lineups. And it's relatively similar over on FanDuel. Let's go over to FanDuel really quickly. And if we tried to fit all those guys in, you know the deal by now. We can't do it, right? Just 1,000 left per player. We'll leave out J.K. Dobbins. He's less pricey over here, but still the 4th highest guy at 13,500. I mean, we've seen some running backs recently, right? 11,500, $10,000 that we've been playing in low risk lineups. 13.5 for a 3-way committee is probably too much. 7,250 left per player. And if we scroll down, Will Dissly, who was their starting tight end, has been their starting tight end for like 4 weeks. Price is a backup for some reason. He's only $7,000, but we will play him. And then you can play whoever you want after this, whether it's Gus Edwards, Isaiah Likely, Justice Hill, some combination here. But I think it's these 4 guys you want to get in. And you probably want Lamar in your MVP or Herbert if you feel that he is the better play of the two. But Lamar and Herbert will be the most popular MVPs tonight, not the highest priced Derrick Henry. So just keep that in mind as you're building your low-risk lineups for FanDuel tonight. All right, let's go back to DraftKings and let's think about high-risk contests, leagues, GPPs, satellites. The top 1%, top 0.1% gets most of the money. That's when you want to have a really high-risk approach. It could be smaller contests. It could be larger contests. It depends on the payout structure. And ownership is interesting tonight, but let's talk about some underperformers and some overperformers first before we get into that. Water break, of course. All right. Unfortunately, no underperforming wide receivers for the slate. Yesterday was another great day for underperforming wide receivers. A.J. Brown on the showdown slate last night. We had Keenan Allen in the afternoon, and a couple other guys hit value as well. No underperforming wide receivers. However, we do have 2 underperforming running backs and 1 overperforming running back all on the same team, which may pique your interest a little bit. The overperformer is J.K. Dobbins, has 20, 30, 40 points outperformed his fantasy expectations. And again, for this formula, it's basically where a guy has got the ball on the field. A carry on the 1-yard line will be worth a lot more than a carry on the 50-yard line. Targets in the passing game, how many opportunities you've gotten, and there are formulas to turn your opportunities into expected fantasy points. And if you have less fantasy points than expected, you're underperforming. If you have more, you're overperforming. And talent has a big factor into this, and so does offensive scheme. So a guy like Saquon Barkley, for example, who is completely overperforming his expectations, he's doing that because he's good, right? It's the guys that aren't the elite talents that are underperforming or overperforming that we're looking to capitalize on, especially on showdown slates. And Dobbins, as great of a story as he is coming back from his injuries, he's not a super elite performer anymore to where he should be outperforming his fantasy points like he is. Instead, Gus Edwards is underperforming his fantasy points. He just came back a couple of weeks ago. 2.7 fantasy points last week, 5.5 fantasy points in his return. He's underperforming, hasn't scored a touchdown all year, is getting some red zone opportunities. And in fact, since he's returned, he's out red zone opportunity, if that's a term, J.K. Dobbins, which is interesting in its own right. Another reason that we're not looking to play J.K. Dobbins in low-risk lineups because we're trying to lock up all the scoring, and J.K. Dobbins isn't even getting all the red zone touches, so we're not even guaranteeing all the scoring if we do that. The other guy who, if you haven't been in our Discord, we bitched about it last week. If you haven't been watching Chargers games, you probably don't know who he is. But Hassan Haskins, he's the min price on both sites. He's underperformed, and you may say, how the hell can you underperform with just 4 carries? It's because 3 of those 4 carries have come on the 1 or 2 yard line, and he only has 1 touchdown to show for it. His other carry was on the 16-yard line in the red zone, but that was on a 3rd and 1. So they're using him in short yardage situations. And a guy is $200. Not again. They could change it up. This is very role-based, and it's very fluid. But Haskins, there's a chance he scores 2 touchdowns tonight from the 1-yard line. Again, not likely, but there is a chance he scores 1 if he continues to get 1-yard line opportunities. And 6 points, 6.1 points at $200 could be worth it if we have a bunch of the high-priced guys perform up to expectations, and you need a punt to fit all of those guys in. Now, the most likely expectation for Haskins tonight is 0.1 points, 0.0 points, 0.2 points. But if he can sneak in, if he gets those carries on the goal line like he has the last 2 weeks, he could easily sneak into the optimal lineup. Probably a large field only play, but if you really like a lot of the, especially on, again, this is probably DraftKings only. But if you like a lot of the guys at the top, you like a lot of the expensive, and you like a lot of the popular guys, you will need a lower-owned 1% play to fit them in, and Haskins could fit the bill there. And again, on FanDuel, maybe you go with 4 studs and a punt. Haskins is $6K over here, more expensive than the min price on DraftKings. But again, if he scores 6 points here, and the 4 studs perform, that could easily be an optimal winner. So just keep that in mind. And Gus Edwards, again, is going to be low owned on both sites. No one wants to play Gus Edwards. He's underperforming as well. Maybe he sneaks in for a touchdown too. So just keep that in mind as you're building when it comes to the Chargers running backs. Let's talk about the tight end situation for the Chargers really quickly. We talked about Disley. He is dominating opportunities, dominating routes. However, with Hayden Hurst still out, some guys you probably have never heard of are also running routes for them. And again, this is a slate, especially on DraftKings, where we don't have that many low-owned players to choose from. So we're going to have to dig deep in some spots. So Stone Smart, real name, also min-price, ran 6 routes last week. And so did Tucker Fisk, somehow also a real guy. $200, ran 6 routes. He saw 2 targets last week. So they're running all these different guys and in 5 to 10 route rolls. And again, on a slate where we need salary savings, a slate where we need low-owned plays, these guys could fit the bill. And again, they're probably large field only plays, but you do have to keep them in your player pool if you're building 10 plus lineups, 20 plus lineups, and especially 150 lineups, just based on how the slate shakes out. Because I'm going to pull up the Occupy model, and if I can find it, here it is. And if we sort by DraftKings Flex ownership, that's what this this column is here. So again, if you have access to the model, this is where Candid, who I pointed out earlier in the show, was looking at the Kamate Turpin play. We look at, again, we're looking for low-owned plays under 20% or so. And we see Rashad Bateman, Gus Edwards, both defenses, Aguilar, and then we get the punts, Jalen Reagor, Stone Smart, Deontay Johnson, Tylan Wallace. Like, not the most confident plays, right? There are a decent amount of slates where we're like, oh, we like these guys under 20%. There aren't many guys. Again, we got the angles with Gus Edwards and Hassan Haskins. We got the angles with the tight ends for LA. But again, nothing you're super thrilled about. So we're looking for 1% guys or 2% guys that can offset not playing multiple of these players in larger contests, in high-risk contests. So it's a really difficult slate on DraftKings, especially when you compare that to, you look at the captain ownership. Maybe you say, okay, well, I don't have to play too many low-owned guys. I can play a low-owned captain. But the best plays are higher-owned tonight. Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and then you got Ladd McConkey and Derrick Henry. They're going to account for a vast majority of the captain ownership, as they should, because they project really well for tonight. Look, same on FanDuel. However, the difference on FanDuel tonight is we see, Henry 20%, Herbert 33%, Lamar at 41% MVP. That's almost all of the ownership. But look at the difference in how many lower-owned plays we have on FanDuel. We have Cameron Dicker, both tight ends for Baltimore, Palmer, a starting receiver, Bateman, Justice Hill, Edwards, both defenses, like a lot more low-owned plays on FanDuel. So tonight, the key takeaway here is all what I'm trying to get to, what I'm trying to say here is, on FanDuel, you can be more willing to play Lamar, Herbert, and even Henry to an extent because you have so many low-owned plays to differentiate yourself and differentiate your lineup. However, on DraftKings, if you want to play Lamar or Herbert or McConkey or Henry, there aren't that many low-owned plays unless you're playing the guys I've talked about already that are pretty thin for a typical showdown slate. So my advice would be, on FanDuel, be more willing to play Lamar and Herbert and Henry to an extent. But on DraftKings, I think you almost have to fade Lamar and Herbert unless you feel really confident and are playing a lot of those guys that we talked about, a lot of those 1 to 10% plays, and instead opt for Zay Flowers, Dobbins, Will Disley, Quentin Johnston, and the Baltimore tight ends in a mid-range build. Our model in particular loves Zay Flowers tonight. He's ranked, let's look on DraftKings. Flowers ranked 3rd overall and 4th overall on FanDuel, which is pretty surprising considering the guys on the slate. So if you're looking for a low-owned captain, our model has the approval for Zay Flowers. So he would be the guy I would look to get different with if you're going to do it. So it is a difficult slate. And again, not a slate that I'm going to heavily invest in. We have in our daily plug how much of your bankroll you should allocate. Unlike the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game on Thursday, where we thought we had a fantastic angle and we could go and make really leveraged builds, that's not necessarily the case tonight. Again, and maybe you feel differently. Maybe your takeaway from this video is you really like Edwards and Haskins, you really like the LA tight ends, or you really like some of the low-owned captains or MVPs, then feel free to allocate more of your bankroll. But for me, it's a really tough showdown slate. Anytime we have a high total game, unless you build for the under, that is the one final factor. Obviously, my $1 million win was a high total game that went way under the total. You could do that here by playing the defenses pretty heavily. Both are 5 to 10% projected ownership. So that is certainly another angle you can take. Not really the best case scenario with both of their middle linebackers out, but we've seen crazier things happen on showdown slates. So that'll do it for this video. Again, make sure you're subscribed. We're going to have the Thursday video, the Friday video, and of course the main slate video for Sunday. So make sure you're subscribed to get notified when those drop. Give us a thumbs up If you like the video, helps us out more than you know. Any questions about tonight's slate, drop a comment below. I will happily answer them before the slate begins at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. You could also join our Discord server. You saw the screenshot from our member Candid. We're always in there sweating the games and answering any strategy questions. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. The link is in the description. Daily plug with strategy and tips and rankings and specific contest lineup strategies. Make sure you go check that out. That'll be posted this afternoon. That's up on the site, OccupyFantasy.com. And our model that you saw on screen, that'll be updated throughout the day, as will our lineup builder. So, Brian for Occupy, thank you for listening. Good luck as always in tonight's Baltimore and LA Showdown slate.